friendly desert community where the sun is hot, the moon is beautiful, and mysterious lights pass overhead while we all pretend to sleep. Welcome to Night Vale. Guys, you probably should know the deal by now. I take a thing, which in this case is the Welcome to Night Vale podcast, and I tell you the good, the bad, and the uncertain as to whether or not I think it's good or bad. But first I want to explain what this is. As you can probably tell, it is a podcast. From the fact that I said it's a podcast. What's it a podcast about? It is narrated by the character Cecil Baldwin. It's done in a radio show format, telling all the news of Night Vale, a pretty average community. And they talk about pretty mundane things. You know, places that you thought existed kind of not existing, blow clouds appearing and raining down animal carcasses, earthquakes that register really highly on the Richter scale and yet no one can apparently perceive them, and perfectly healthy cats just floating in the men's bathroom. That's gonna be our station's pet. You know, average stuff. Also, I should probably explain that I am cosplaying as Cecil, so that means that this is probably going to be a positive review. Let's actually get down to it, shall we? So first off, I've got a bit of a combined one of just the style and the humour. I really like this show. It's a bit kind of offbeat. They take everything and make it kind of mundane and funny in that way. And it's just, I just like it. It's just a really interesting style that I haven't seen before, and it's just kind of humorous. It's kind of funny how just like the entire town and everything seems to operate on this inherent confusion and weirdness. On Tuesday there will be a march of the hooded figures, and Wednesday has been cancelled. I just find it so weird and funny. It just had this really interesting kind of viewpoint, I guess. Granted, it's a viewpoint of just like, all the babies will drown in blood. I also really like the characters, which is kind of weird because when it comes right down to it, we barely know anything about any of the characters. I mean, Cecil, who's the main guy, he doesn't really describe himself, and we're only judging that he's a man and that he's between 20 and 60 or something just based on his voice. Everything else is fan art, including like how I've decided to design my character. Even Carlos, who is the main interest of the character, gets a very, very, very kind of limited description. We know that he has perfect hair and that he has lab coat. It kind of makes sense though, because it's supposed to be for like local news things. All these people know about each other, so it doesn't come off as kind of like they don't want to describe the characters. And third, this isn't really a major one, but can I just like be like, congratulations on your voice, good sir. It's just very good. The only thing that I'm a bit uncertain about is the continuity. Now, I would like to point out at this point that I haven't watched all of the things. I think there's like 25 or so, and I'm up to like 17. The way that all the continuity and such unfolds is kind of typical of what you'd expect of like a local news kind of thing. So they'd be talking about, oh, Carlos has arrived, and then like maybe 5 episodes later they'll talk about, oh, Carlos has discovered this, and Carlos and this, and Carlos and that, and blah. And this also has tons of other parallel storylines, like we might be talking about the angels that the old woman Josie met. Or we might be talking about the star quarterback who just happens to have 2 heads. But at the same time, it doesn't have like direct continuity. Like, you don't have any of this like cut halfway through someone talking like, to be continued. Or at least if there is, I'm not up to it yet. While there is continuity, there will always be like at least one major story. Like there's one that's a major bulletin about how all wheat and wheat byproducts have turned into snakes. And then turned back again. And then I think they burnt them. And then we will never speak of this again. So we do have that continuity, but I feel like at times there's just not enough of it. Perfect example is the main 2 characters of the story, Cecil and Carlos. And Cecil has an obvious thing for Carlos from the very beginning, and yet there is very little development that has occurred, like in 17 episodes. They've only just gotten to the point where they've like talked to each other and he's been all, oh my god. But that's just kind of more a personal thing than anything. The single con that I have to give this show is that at times it is so repetitive. And I think there is no better example than things being revealed as to be not existent. Like there is at bare minimum one thing that is revealed to not actually exist like once every 2 episodes. Don't get me wrong, I don't hate like, oh, this thing, blah blah blah, but when you do it all the time, it just looks so unoriginal. Like, I mean, at the very first episode, we had one thing disappearing, which was fine, but then we had stuff like, oh, underground villages, and oh my god, this there's UFOs and stuff, and oh my god, no, the angels, and then Carlos, and we had all this variety, and now half of it just seems like, oh, it's non-existent. Like, I'm kind of questioning, is the entire town non-existent? Can we just have a list of the things that are existent? Please. It would make it so much easier. Now we come, as we inevitably must, to my conclusion. Now come on, I'm dressed as Cecil, so you have to understand that this is going to be a review that I'm going to be like, yay! At the same time, I kind of feel like I made the same mistake that I did when I watched Adventure Time. Because like Adventure Time, it has really interesting style and interesting storylines. But the problem is that it's lacking a bit in continuity and it's a bit repetitive. And that, in a similar fashion to Adventure Time, means that because I marathoned it, I probably didn't enjoy it as much as I should have. Regardless, it is a really interesting show, and I really like the fandom, and I'm definitely going to continue watching it, but I'm not necessarily going to argue that it's the best thing I've seen in months. Regardless of all these things, I hope you guys end up watching the podcast. If you do, tell me what you guys think of it. I always want to know what your opinions are, even if you rarely give them to me. I hope you have a good day. Good night, listeners.